The first time I signed something for my son, without reading it all the way through, it was a birthday card. The second time, it was a power of attorney. I didn't know those were connected until it was almost too late. Welcome to Dad's Pure Revenge. My name doesn't matter yet, but the house does. And so does the number 890,000. Stick around for that one. If you're watching this from your own kitchen table tonight, drop where you're from in the comments, hit like if you've ever trusted the wrong person with your paperwork, and subscribe, because there's more where this came from. I want to tell you about the house first, before I tell you about my son, because the house is the only witness that never lied to me. 214 Birchwood Lane, Maple Grove, Ohio. 3 bedrooms, a porch that faced east so the morning coffee always tasted better out there, and a kitchen floor that Margaret and I put down ourselves in 1994, on our hands and knees, arguing about grout color for 2 straight days. She wanted eggshell, I wanted a plain white. She won. She usually did. Margaret passed 6 years ago, in March, and I kept setting out 2 coffee cups every morning for almost a year after that. Out of habit, more than grief by the end. Though I never told anyone that. I still keep the porch light on every night. Force of habit. Or maybe I just like knowing the house looks lived in. Even on the nights it doesn't feel like it. I'm Walter Briggs, 68 years old, 31 years teaching shop class at Maple Grove High School, before I retired, which means half the contractors and mechanics in this town once sat in my classroom and called me Mr. Briggs. I raised 1 son, Derek, mostly on my own after Margaret got sick the first time, back when he was in middle school. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I did it perfectly. I have one flaw I need to admit to you right up front, because it's the reason everything in this story happened at all. I trust paperwork more than I trust my own gut. If someone hands me a document and tells me it's routine, standard, nothing to worry about, I sign it. I did it my whole life. Insurance forms, school forms, and eventually, the form that almost cost me my house. Derek is 41 now, works in regional logistics, married to a woman named Vanessa who sells commercial real estate 2 towns over. They live nice, newer cars, a house in a subdivision called Ashford Point, with a 2-car garage and a lawn service that comes every Thursday. I'm proud of him, or I was. In the plain, uncomplicated way, a father is proud of a son who made something of himself. I didn't ask a lot of questions about how. Here's where the story really starts. Tuesday, September 9th, 6:15 in the morning. I was coming down the porch steps to get the newspaper. Yes, I still get an actual newspaper. Laugh if you want. And my foot caught the second step, the one that's always been a half-inch lower than the others. I went down hard, broke my hip, lay there for 11 minutes before Tom Whitfield next door heard me and came running in his bathrobe. St. Francis Hospital, room 412. Hip replacement surgery 2 days later. And then, because I was 68 and living alone and the surgeon wanted to see me walk unassisted before he'd sign off, I got moved to Maple Grove Rehabilitation Center for what they told me would be 2 to 4 weeks. That's where I was, on Thursday, September 18th, at 4:50 in the afternoon, in a room with beige walls and a TV bolted to the ceiling, when Derek came to visit and left his phone on the little rolling table while he stepped out to take a different call in the hallway. His phone rang again almost right away. Vanessa's name on the screen. He must not have heard it lock, or he forgot the room had a landline extension picked up somewhere, because I could hear both sides of it clear as day through the door he hadn't shut all the way. I heard Vanessa say, "Did you talk to the realtor yet?" And I heard my son say, "Not yet, I will. He has to go to a nursing home. Vanessa, there's no version of this where he lives alone again. The doctor basically said as much." I didn't say anything. I want you to understand that. I didn't call out, didn't knock on the wall, didn't do anything to let him know I'd heard. I just lay there with the beige ceiling over me and let it sit in the room with me for a while. It's a strange thing, hearing your own future decided for you in a hallway. You'd think it would feel like anger right away. It didn't. It felt like cold water, slow, from the feet up. Derek came back in a few minutes later, smiling, asking how the physical therapy was going, and I smiled back and told him it was going fine. I didn't examine what I'd heard yet. I just let it sit there, folded up small, somewhere in the back of my chest, while I finished my rehab like a man with nothing on his mind but getting his hip working again. I want to tell you about Tom Whitfield here, because Tom is the reason I made it through those weeks with any peace of mind at all. Tom's 63, lives alone since his wife moved to Tampa to be near her sister, and he has never once in the 11 years I've known him asked me for anything. While I was at rehab, Tom fed my cat, Duke, every single morning at 7, without being asked. He mowed my lawn on his own schedule and never mentioned it. He called me every night at 8 o'clock, and if I didn't pick up by the third ring, he told me later, he'd have come straight over. "That's just what you do for your neighbor," he said once, like it wasn't worth thanking him for. Tom never said a bad word about Derek to me. Not once. He didn't have to. It was Tom who told me about the sign. Second week of October, a Tuesday. He called at his usual 8 o'clock, and there was a pause before he said anything, which wasn't like him. Then he said, "Walter, I don't want to be the one to tell you this, but there's a for sale sign in your front yard. Went up this morning. Got a lockbox on the door too." I didn't say anything again. Second time in this story I've told you that, and it won't be the last. I just thanked him and hung up and lay there in my rehab bed looking at that same beige ceiling, and I let myself actually think about what I'd heard in that hallway for the first time. Here's what I didn't know yet, and what it took me another week and a good lawyer to understand. Back when I'd first gone into the hospital for the hip surgery, Derek had come to me with a document he said was routine. A durable power of attorney, just for medical decisions and bill paying while you're laid up. Dad, standard stuff, everybody does this. I signed it in my hospital bed with a pen that barely worked, half out of it from the pain medication, because my son handed it to me and told me it was routine. That's the flaw I told you about. I trust paperwork. That document, it turned out, wasn't limited to medical decisions and bill paying. It was broad enough that a motivated person with a cooperative real estate agent could use it to list a house. I called an elder law attorney named Diane Castellano out of Columbus. A woman, a physical therapist at the rehab center, had mentioned once, almost in passing, when I'd asked an idle question about power of attorney one afternoon. I called her from the hallway phone at Maple Grove Rehab on a Wednesday, quietly, while Derek was at work. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting once. Then she said, "Mr. Briggs, I need you to not sign anything else. Nothing. Not a birthday card, if you can help it. Can you do that?" I told her I could. I wasn't angry, and I want to be honest with you about that, because anger is easy, and it burns out fast. What I was done. Quietly, completely done, in a way that had nothing to do with raising my voice. I called Diane back 2 days later and told her I wanted to know exactly what my son had done, and exactly what I still had the legal right to undo. Here's what she found, laid out in plain terms over coffee in her office on a Friday morning, 3 weeks after my hip surgery, my cane leaning against her desk. The power of attorney I'd signed was valid, but Ohio law required that a sale of real property under a POA still be conducted in the principal's, my, clear interest, with proper notice, and it could be challenged and unwound if it was shown the principal lacked full understanding of what he was signing, or if the agent breached his duty. Derek had listed the house on Birchwood Lane at $890,000, which, Diane told me, raising an eyebrow, was actually a fair number for that street these days, my little 3-bedroom having become, without my noticing, a very desirable piece of real estate in a town that had quietly gotten expensive. The sale had already gone through, closed. Derek and Vanessa had used a chunk of those proceeds as a down payment on a new house of their own, a bigger one, out in a development called Ridgeview Estates, closing on it themselves the very same week, then leaving almost immediately after for what Vanessa's office was calling a business trip, a conference in Charlotte, 4 nights. The kind of thing you book when you think the hard part is finished, and now it's just champagne and congratulations. Diane looked at me across that desk and said something I still think about. "Mr. Briggs, they moved fast because they assumed you wouldn't find out until it was already done. That's not a plan. That's a bet. And it's a bet you can still win, if you want to." I did. She filed to revoke the power of attorney immediately. That part takes effect the moment it's signed and delivered. No drama required. Then she filed a motion in probate court to void the real estate transaction on the grounds of breach of fiduciary duty, because Derek, as my agent, had a legal obligation to act in my interest, and using my house to fund a bigger house for himself while planning to place me in a facility against my stated wishes was about as clear a breach as she said she'd seen in 20 years of practice. The court granted an emergency injunction freezing the funds and the new property title, pending a hearing. Clean. Legal. Nothing I did required raising my voice or sneaking around in the dark. It required a lawyer, a filing fee, and the truth. While that moved through the courts, I did one more thing. I sat down with Diane and rewrote my will. The old one split everything evenly between Derek and my granddaughter Lily's college fund, the way it had been since Margaret and I first drew it up years back. The new one left the bulk of what I have, the recovered proceeds from Birchwood Lane, my savings, Margaret's mother's ring, into an irrevocable trust for Lily, administered by Diane's firm until she turns 25, with a modest, respectful provision for Derek that I won't get into the exact number of, because it's not the number that matters. I also left $5,000 to Tom Whitfield for feeding the cat, which made Diane laugh out loud, the first time I'd heard anyone laugh in weeks. Now here's the part you saw on the thumbnail, and I promise you, it happened close enough to exactly like this that I don't need to dress it up. Derek and Vanessa flew back from Charlotte on a Sunday, October 27th, landing at 2:40 in the afternoon. They drove straight from the airport to Ridgeview Estates, to their new house, still smiling in the pictures Vanessa posted that morning of the two of them at the airport gate, tagged New Chapter. Derek told Diane's process server, later, that he remembers being in a good mood the whole ride, playing an old song on the radio, something from when he was a teenager, windows cracked because the October air was finally turning cold and honest. The key didn't turn. He tried it twice, Diane told me afterward, because that's what people do. They assume it's their own hand that's wrong, before they assume the world has changed underneath them. Taped to the door at eye level was a sealed manila envelope with his name on it, and inside was the court order freezing the property, a formal notice from the title company that the transaction was under review, and a single handwritten note from me. I kept it short. I told him I knew about the hallway. I told him the house on Birchwood Lane was never his to sell, and that a man doesn't get to decide where his father lives by deciding it quietly on a phone call and hoping his father never finds out. I told him I loved him, because I do, and that this wasn't punishment, it was just the truth finally catching up to a decision he made too fast. Vanessa started screaming in the driveway. A neighbor over there told Tom about it later. Apparently word travels the same way in Ridgeview Estates as it does on Birchwood Lane. Derek, I heard, didn't scream. He just stood there holding the envelope, according to that same neighbor, for a long time before he got back in the car. I'm not going to tell you the court case took a single day, because it didn't. It took another 4 months, filings and a hearing, and one very uncomfortable Thanksgiving that Derek and I spent apart. But in the end, the judge upheld the injunction. The Birchwood Lane sale was voided as a breach of fiduciary duty, and the buyer, a young couple with a toddler, as it turned out, who I actually felt for, got their earnest money back and moved on to a different house a few streets over. I sold 214 Birchwood Lane myself, on my own terms, 4 months later, to a retired teacher and her husband, who told me over coffee in my own kitchen that they loved the eggshell grout in the floor and had no intention of changing it. I told them the story behind it, just the good part. I live in a condo now, off Route 9, 1 level, no stairs to catch my foot on. Duke the cat lives with me still. Tom comes by on Sundays and we watch football and don't talk about any of it, because we don't need to. Derek and I talk now, carefully, once a week or so. He apologized, and I believe he meant it, though I've learned that meaning it and earning it back are 2 different timelines, and I'm in no hurry on the second one. Lily still doesn't know about the trust. She's 12. There's time. Some nights I sit out on my little balcony with a cup of coffee, and I think about that hallway and about how quiet the worst moments of your life can actually be. Nobody yelled at St. Francis Hospital that day. Nobody yelled when I called Diane from a hallway phone. The only screaming in this whole story happened in a driveway in Ridgeview Estates, and it wasn't mine to do. I used to think that going along with things quietly was the same as having a peaceful life. I don't think that anymore. Peace isn't the absence of a fight. It's knowing, when the fight comes, that you're standing on solid ground, with the truth in your hand and nothing to be ashamed of. If this one hit home for you, if you've ever had to protect yourself from someone who was supposed to protect you, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. Like this video if you believe the truth always finds its way to daylight eventually. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. And I'll see you in the next one, right here on Dad's Pure Revenge.